Hi, Dave Garski here for SoundHole Guitar Lessons. I get asked all the time about changing chords clearly in rhythm, how to do it. My students want to know how to be able to change their chords in tempo with a song that they're working on, but it's hard to do when you're learning something like a brand new song. Like if you're just going from G to C to D, that's fairly easy. After a while, because most beginners are going to be able to play. Okay, so open string chords are fairly easy to do. But what about if you're working on bar chords? Okay, I've recently done a few articles, and there's going to be more to come about bar chords. Bar chords can be a challenge for most beginners because it's requiring a lot more strength in your hand to push down all of these strings and still be able to utilize these three fingers to make the chord. So if I'm playing an A major chord as a bar chord, I've got all four fingers down, plus I'm barring here using this muscle in my thumb. Well, that's going to get a little uncomfortable after a while, unless you practice. So the question has been with some of my students who are working on the bar chords, they understand how to get them and how to practice them. You know, the basic bar chords, like if I'm doing minors and minors here, fifth and sixth string root chords. They get that part. What they're finding difficult is being able to change them in tempo. If I'm going, it might sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they have to stop and move. Well, now they're already out of tempo. Okay, so what I've been telling them is keep your fingers down. Keep your fingers on the strings. Never take your fingers off of the strings when you're changing between chords. So I'm going to keep, if you watch what I do here, I'm going to keep all of my fingers down and just move over like that. So I'm going. Notice my first finger stays. It just kind of moves over from the sixth string root over to the fifth string root here. So I'm going 6 to 5. So these three fingers are moving, but this one stays here. So I have a point of reference for both chords, changing chords clearly in rhythm. So say if I want to go from E to D to A, going from this chord to this chord, or this chord to this chord. If you notice, my first finger never really leaves the strings. I'll do it as minor chords. I may take some pressure off so I can actually move the finger. I'm not doing this. And using all of that movement. We're looking for economization of movement. We want to be able to do the minimum movements between chords to save on the time to go from one chord to the next chord. Now, of course, if I do chords that are up in this area that are not bar chords, like a jazz chord, like a major 7 to like another, like a major 9, well, there again, now we have a different thing here. I'm changing all four of my fingers between the two chords. But there again, this is about practicing. This is about going from one shape to the next shape. And I don't mean like a few times. I'm not talking like a couple of dozen times. I'm talking about hundreds of times that you do this. Maybe even thousands of times that you play these chords, and you just do it with a metronome. All of those were basic jazz chords that are not bar chords. So what if I do between bar chords and some of the open fingered jazz chords? So if I do, like, say maybe an A minor 7, idea. I mean, I'm doing bar chords here. Let's say if I do to D major 7. So the idea here is to be able to change the chords clearly in rhythm, even if you miss them. So if I'm playing a song and it's like, let's go back to the open string chord. Let's say if I'm doing something like, four easy chords, G, D, A minor 7 to C. Those are all very easy chords to do. But there are people who still struggle with changing those four chords in rhythm. I'm going to try to change the chords and mess them up here, but I'm not going to stop here. Okay, and that's going to be on purpose. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of randomly play some chords and try to miss a couple of them and watch what I do. 2, 3, 4. It's hard for me to mess it up, but you kind of get the idea. I'm still in rhythm on the right side. I haven't changed my tempo or my rhythm. I'm trying to change the chords clearly in rhythm while I'm doing this, which when I see this with my beginners, when they're trying to change these chords at a tempo in a song, they will miss the chord and then they'll stop. And I tell them, no, just keep this moving mechanically. Keep your right hand moving. Keep it, if you miss the chord, find it during the measure that you've got to play, the amount of time. If you've got 2 bars to get it, you're going to get the chord in 2 bars, and usually less than 1. Okay, working on chords that are sort of strange to play. Recently, one of my students came across an old Chicago song called "Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is?" Well, that's a fairly easy song for an advanced beginner or beginner intermediate. It has some jazz chords, but there's a part in there where it goes, but if you play at a tempo, this chord here, this F6, is not a very common chord. So for me, I had to actually stop and think about it as I'm playing, going from E minor 7 to the F6 and get it clearly. So that meant I had to do this a few times. And I still struggle with it because it's not a chord that I play a lot. But since this song is a fairly medium tempo, it's not that difficult. So if I'm playing 2, 3, and that part again. It has almost like a swing feel. Get the idea, and I'm sure you know that song fairly well. That kind of an idea, that was new for me. I hadn't seen that progression in a long time. I knew the song, I grew up with it. But going from D to E minor 7, that's nothing. But going from there to the F6, that's kind of a weird chord. Okay, so that progression. Da, 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 da. Okay, so that's just an idea of something I had to work on. It was one of those things that's like, hey, that's something I haven't done in a while. That kind of progression is a little bit strange for me. So that means even I have to practice this stuff. You have to put in the time. You have to get to know these chords. Use a metronome. And I really stress this a lot with my students. If you're learning a song, practice the song with the song. Not only are you learning how to change the chords clearly in rhythm with the song, you're learning the structure of the song, you're memorizing the structure of the song, because you want to eventually get to the point where you don't need sheet music in front of you in order to play it. Not only that, you're training your ears to listen for specific things, specific structures, things that make sense to you in context. You would know any part of the song. You want to be able to know a song that well. In 1977, I was 14 years old. I was still taking guitar lessons. And one of the songs that I wanted to learn from my guitar teacher was Stairway to Heaven. Well, he basically said, we can do it, but it's going to take a long time to learn that song because it's such a long song and it's really involved. And I was still considered a beginner, even after a year of lessons. But he said, let's try it. Let's see what we can do. What I didn't know is that this song would take me 2 full years to learn from the top to the bottom. And imagine how much practice I must have put into it to play that song. I mean, 3-part suite. Everybody recognizes this part. But it took a long time for me to get comfortable with every single part, every single section of a, 7, 8, 9 minute long song. It's a classic rock song that every guitar player should learn how to play. So when you're learning songs, you have to put in the time. You genuinely have to put in the time. There is no other way to do it. Hope some of this helps you with your practicing, as for, going from chord to chord. You have to practice as much as you possibly can. When I talk about practicing, I'm talking the length of your lesson. If you have a lesson with me each week, it's usually an hour. That means you only see me 1 hour a week. The other 6 days of the week, you should be putting in 1 hour. That means 7 hours a week is what you should be doing. My job as a guitar teacher is to show you some of the easier ways to do things. The practical things, the things that are going to be useful for you in the long run. Changing chords clearly in rhythm like this is bar chords. These are all just little tricks being able to, you can see just the economization of movement. Anyway, I hope that helps. We'll see you in the next video.